Hey everybody! Welcome to the last episode of Wild Rescuers, Guardian of the Taiga, our book reading. I did want to give a shout out to Scholastic. That's who published this book. So they are the ones that were able to help us read it today. Also, I'm going to try to have a little reading buddy today. This is Molly, if you didn't know. This is my puppy Molly. She's really scared all the time, but she's really cute and likes to lick my face. But she may or may not stay on my lap. I don't know yet. So she'll just be here, and if not, she's around. Oh, yes, hello. But with that being said, it's time to find out what happens in our book. The final 2 chapters. Wait, no, Molly, you can't get on the table. So we left off with Stacy and the wolves discovering that their forest was on fire. So chapter 19. Any lingering tiredness Stacy, Paige, and her wolves felt vanished when they saw their beloved Taiga on fire. They raced through the foothills to the swamp. Stacy climbed onto Basil's back, while Paige rode on Tucker. They were traveling back much faster than their trip out had been, but it still took several agonizing hours. While Stacy and the wolves headed towards the fire, most of the forest animals were fleeing in the opposite direction. Stacy had never seen anything like it. As she and the pack swam across the lake, all kinds of animals paddled past them. Beavers, otters, foxes, even elk. Hundreds of birds were overhead, flying away from the bellowing smoke. Stacy knew the animals were operating on instinct, protecting themselves from the smoke and the flames. Her instinct, however, was that Paige and the wolves was to get the other members of their pack as quickly as possible. Stacy would never forgive herself if something happened to Wink or Noah. It had been her decision to travel far away without those 2 members of the wolf pack. As they approached the taiga, dense smoke and ash filled the air, making Stacy's eyes water and her throat ache. But that was nothing compared to her fear that Wink and Noah might be in trouble. How will we get them without running into the fire ourselves? She could see the great swaths of the forest have already burned. Cinders floated in the scorching air, dropping on the dry vegetation and sparking small blazes that quickly became big. Each step was treacherous. Suddenly, Stacy saw that intentional look on the largest bird, or what looked like initially the largest bird she had ever seen, flying towards the fire, accompanied by the loud humming sound. A helicopter? Stacy yelled. She had never seen one in person. The noise confused her. It was also familiar to her. But how? She stopped in her tracks and stared at the helicopter, mesmerized by the whirling noise. All of a sudden, Basil and Tucker pulled out behind some bushes. Everest was standing tall in front of her, baring his teeth at the helicopter above him. Pretty sure it's here to help fight the fire, guys, Stacy said, stepping out from behind the bushes. I don't need protecting from it. Thanks, though. It's likely heading to where the fire is the most out of control. Hopefully that's not the cave. A couple of bats flew past and hovered over Paige's head. That gave Stacy an idea. Paige, can the bats lead us to the cave? She asked. Show us the safest route? Paige conferred with the bats for a moment, and then she gave Stacy a bark that sounded remarkably like a yes. Can you bark like a yes? No, I don't think so. Fine, Wink, and Noah, Stacy said. Of course, the bats had no control over the wind, but they were able to lead the pack through the parts of the forest that were not yet ravaged by the flames. Other areas were already so badly charred that there was nothing left to burn. Those areas presented their own problems. The forest was full of humans who were dressed in suits that protected them from the tall flames. Humans who wouldn't understand why a girl was racing towards a fire with a wolf pack and a dog and a small colony of bats. Stacy had never experienced a forest fire before, thankfully, but she had read about them. Still, she was shocked by the number of people who had shown up to fight the fire. She was grateful for them, of course, but they are making it particularly hard at the moment to run by unnoticed. They had to skirt a large campsite full of men and women and fire gear and others who seemed to be supporting them with water stations and a whole picnic table covered in radios, walkie-talkies, and cell phones. A group of people, their faces were full of ash and soot, were gathered around a map, talking strategy. From what Stacy could see, parts of the map had been colored over with marker, showing where the fire was most concentrated. Stacy longed to get a look at that map, to see if their clearing in the cave were safe, but of course she couldn't do that without raising a lot of questions. Addison had the same thought. Stacy caught her just as she was about to run into the campsite and look at the map. "No, Addie," Stacy whispered. "Too dangerous. Besides, Wink and Noah are smart." Addison shot her a look. Well, Noah's smart at least. He'll have found a way to protect Wink and himself. Stacy and the wolves were crouched in the undergrowth around the firefighters' campsite, trying to avoid being noticed and find the best route back to their cave. That was the first place she would look for Noah and Wink. If they had been forced to escape, they would have left some indication behind on the cave map to let the others know where they had gone. The firefighters were so close, Stacy could hear their conversation. "This is ground zero," one man said, pointing to the spot on the map. "Careless campers?" asked another. The first one shook his head. "I don't think so. But we did find some surveying equipment. The forest was so dry that any small spark could have sent it off." Stacy was trying to slink off what she had heard, something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a woman's voice. "Miriam, could this have been arson? The pro-development groups?" The man's face turned to stone. "That's a serious accusation," he yelled over the others' shouting that echoed throughout the forest. "But I wouldn't put it past them. People wouldn't fight to save a burned forest in the same way they would for one full of life. Probably easier to develop, too." Stacy was so angry she nearly marched right up to the firefighters, demanding to know what they would do about the developers. Everest nipped her at her ankles, reminding her, with his loving gray eyes, that she needed to stay hidden. Yeah, she needed to stay hidden. Yep. "All right," she whispered to the wolves and Paige. "Keep low and follow me. We're going to get to the cave." Stacy and the group crouched low to the ground and started slinking away from the campsite. "Hey, a wolf!" she heard someone yell. "Wolves! They're running towards the fire!" Stacy and the others began sprinting away, but Stacy could still hear the humans talking about them as they ran. "Those look like Arctic wolves, didn't they?" the second voice asked. "You're losing it, Mac," the first voice said with a laugh. "You must have inhaled too much smoke." Half an hour later, the group was nearing the cave. Sweat dripped down from Stacy's face and hands, and her hands were raw from crawling. A trip through the forest that should have taken a few minutes took forever. The fire was burning steadily to the south of them and to the west along the river. From what Stacy could tell, It had not yet made it to their cave and the ridge. Stacy couldn't get over how many humans had come to fight the fire, and she had sure had been spotted several times already. There was nothing she could do to prevent it at this point, and it accomplished nothing to dwell on it now. Plus, any humans who spotted her would likely avoid her. No one wants to mess with 4 wolves. They had reached the section of the forest that had been burned. Seeing the charred black earth instead of trees and plants made Stacy's heart hurt. Wisps of smoke rose into the air. The skies had grown dark, and Stacy couldn't tell if the storm was coming or if it was just heavy smoke that was everywhere. Basil, if someone sees me now, they see me, Stacy said urgently. We've got to hurry. Basil understood. She crouched to let Stacy climb onto her back, and they raced towards the rest of the cave. Here, Molly. I'll put you on camera. There you go, Molly. Got your own camera. As they entered the clearing, Stacy stepped over a freshly dug trench of water. This must have been Noah, she said. Smart. Wink nearly knocked them over in relief and excitement. Noah came to the cave opening and ushered Stacy and the others into the cave. Stacy was not prepared for what sight awaited her. There, in the cave, was all the animals in the taiga that weren't fast enough to outrun the fire. Wink and Noah must have herded them into the cave for safety. There was the doe and her 2 fawns, a fox, a cluster of rabbits, squirrels, and raccoons, and a pine martyr. Stacy even saw a lynx pacing back and forth in the cave. She had only seen the lynx once in the taiga. You're all safe here, Stacy said, especially the smaller animals, including Fluff, who is eyeing the fox and the lynx nervously. You're welcome to stay here until the fire is out. Stacy was so relieved that Wink and Noah were okay. She turned and gave them a hug. She then fell to her knees, hungry and exhausted. Noah brought her a water bucket. Wink proudly rolled a new jar of peanut butter in her direction. She could barely mutter her thanks before drinking and eating it. Oh, and there's a really cool picture here. I can't see because Molly's licking my face. See all the animals in there. She finished quickly and was about to help Tucker, who was currently performing Tiggerig on the assortment of animals in the cave, when the bats started zooming around Paige. No, don't get on the table, Molly. Paige ran to the map, jumped, and pointed her nose on the ridge above the cave. The very spot where Stacy had first seen Paige surrounded by the other wolf pack. The wild wolves? Stacy asked. Paige yipped. The fire must have jumped onto the ridge, Stacy said to the others. The other pack is in danger. Firefighters can't get up there. We need to warn them before the fire spreads to their den. Everest bristled and the others simply stared at Stacy, who with a look said, It's not worth the risk. Are they right? Those wolves have caused us all kinds of trouble. Do I really want to risk my wolves' lives in the forest fire to try to save them? But of course, that's exactly what Stacy wanted to do. She couldn't do anything else, and she knew the pack was capable. We at least have to try to rescue them, she said, looking each of them in the eye. Basil, Wink, Everest, you're the fastest. Addison, Tucker, and Noah, stay here with Paige and watch over these animals. There might be other animals that need to be brought inside for safety. Okay, so it's the 4 of us, Stacy said to Everest, Wink, and Basil, pulling her satchel over her head. Let's go. Chapter 20, our final chapter, and it has this cool picture, I don't know if you can see it, of these 2 wolves. Yes, I know you love reading, Molly. You want to read? No? Okay. You're just going to kick me in the stomach? Okay. Chapter 20. A large part of the switchback that led from the cave to the ridge above had been burned away, which made climbing a lot easier. But it also meant that there was a thick smoke clogging the air. Stacy, already irritated throat, began to feel like it had been scraped raw. It was a slow, steep climb, but they finally made it. Oh, this back. Wink was at Stacy's side the whole time, while Basil led the way and Everest walked behind her, making sure that she didn't fall. Hey, Molly, what are you doing? When they finally reached the top, Stacy saw the other wolves were in trouble. Not only was the fire creeping up on the ridge behind them, it was already raging in the old oak forest on the other side of the ravine and was moving fast in their direction. They pushed towards the wild wolves' den, barely able to see through the dark smoke. They had just reached the den when the fire seemed to jump right over the ravine with a roar, and that was almost deafening, meaning it was so loud that it almost kind of blocked out any other noise. Stacy could just make out a couple of the youngest wolves nervously pacing. Oh, you want back up? Come here, Molly. Okay. Our friend is back. She can't decide where she wants to be. She could just make out the couple of the youngest wolves nearby, pacing, clearly itching to leave, but Dusky and the rest of her pack stood their ground. The fire was so close, nothing could make it safe now. A couple of glowing cinders floated by Stacy's face. The fire would be upon them any moment. Convince her to leave, Everest, Stacy yelled. Try to make her understand. Everest ran up to Dusky. They had a tense exchange that lasted several seconds, and then Everest turned away and ran back to Stacy. Dusky was standing firm, refusing to leave. It's not safe here, Stacy shouted. She knew they couldn't understand her, but maybe they'd hear the desperation in her voice. Yes, Molly, I see you. Come with us. We have a place where you can all be protected from the fire. She waited for Dusky to make the right decision for her pack, but she refused to do anything other than stay. The rest of the wolves began panicking as the flames became visible over the tops of the trees. A few of them fled, but the majority of them stayed where they were. Some looked like they wanted to go with Stacy and Everest, yet they didn't want to disobey their alpha. Basil and Wink stepped in, communicating something to the wolves that Stacy couldn't understand. The wolves seemed unsure. We have a safe place, Stacy continued. We guarantee safety to all different kinds of animals, so you have to agree to not hunt while you're with us. But the fire will be here any second, and we'll all burn. You have to decide right now. But the decision was taken from them. What was once a strong, towering oak cracked in two and toppled over, flames licking its branches. It fell right into the middle of the wild pack, crushing several of the members. Stacy screamed, unsure of how many wolves had just been hurt or killed in front of her. Wolves are dying. I have to get my wolves out of here. Come now! She pleaded to Dusky over the flames. The alpha looked over her shoulder and to see three of her wolves running away, not towards Stacy or Everest, but down towards the ravine towards the mines. When Stacy saw them, the two wolf pups hauled together near the down tree. Had they lost their parents? Flames danced closer and closer. No matter what Dusky did now, Stacy and her wolves had to leave. Staying would mean certain death. Stacy ran over and scooped up one of the pups in each arm. and turned towards the direction of the switchback. She paused to look over her shoulder. Dusky stood alone in front of her den. She was illuminated by the flames. Stacy could see a large patch of dark red on the wolf's hindquarters. Blood? Dusky wasn't placing any weight on her back left leg. She had been shot. She can't walk. Stacy shouted to her wolves. Excuse me. Stacy shouted to her wolves, but it was too late to help her. The flames engulfed. But it was too late to help her. The flames enveloped what was left of the den and consumed Dusky. Oh, Dusky, poor girl. There was no time to mourn the loss of Dusky and the others. They set off down to the switchback to the safety of their cave. Everything's going to be okay, Stacy whispered to the pups as the storm clouds began to gather around them. We're going to take care of you. They reached the bottom of the ridge just as the first crack of thunder boomed and raindrops fell. This was a good, steady rain, the kind of rain that put fires out and fed the earth. This should keep the fire from spreading, Stacy said. We're gonna be fine. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash and then a big boom. Stacy instinctively crouched close to the ground and tightened her grip around the puppies. She smelled singed fur. Basil! No! Stacy staggered to her feet and peered through the already dwindling rain at Basil, who was trying to stand up. The wolf had a jagged, bloody strike down her left side of her body. Basil had been struck by lightning. Stacy ran to Basil's side. Wink and Everest were already there, helping her stand. Basil was stunned, but very much alive. She took a few very wobbly steps and slumped over Everest, who bowed down to catch her. Wink helped position her over Everest's back. The helicopter suddenly appeared overhead and dropped a red substance over the unburned area of the Taiga. Everest stood at Stacy's side, ever her protector, Basil lying motionless across his back. Let's go, Stacy shouted, with a strangely familiar whirling of the helicopter blades. And with that, Stacy and the wolves raced back to their cave. So in this picture, we can see the helicopter overhead trying to put out the forest fire. We see Stacy with a couple of wolf puppies and Everest or Wink. Oh no, that's Everest because it's holding Basil on. The cave was oddly quiet, given the number of animals that were currently occupying a small space. Everyone had settled down to wait out the fire. Tucker was already licking the new wolf pups all over like he was their new mama. Noah was busying himself keeping their guest hydrated. Paige was sitting just outside the cave, ready to receive any messages that might come through from the bats. Stacy walked over to Everest, who was standing guard over Basil. Wink was lying on the floor next to her. She had passed out, probably from the pain, when they were on their way back to the cave, and she hadn't woken up yet. How is she? Stacy asked Everest. His sad silver eyes told Stacy that Basil's condition was not good. Stacy examined the jagged red line from the side where the lightning had struck. Once Noah's done getting everyone water, let's have him rinse off some of this blood. We've got to clean the wound. And infection is what could do her in, if she's not already bleeding. Stacy walked over to the cave entrance. She was proud of herself that she had managed to keep it together in front of Everest and Wink. On the inside, she was anything but calm. Basil can't die. She just needs to make it through the night. If she can do that, then she'll be able to pull through. The pain continued, the rain continued as the night began to draw near. As far as Stacy could tell, peering out from the cave entrance at the charred surroundings, the fire was extinguished. Suddenly, Stacy could hear a muffled voice coming from the edge of the clearing. "Better get inside, Paige," Stacy said. But as she was turning to escort the dog inside, she saw Addison emerge from the trees where the voice had come from. "Addie!" she shouted in a hushed voice. "What are you doing? Get in here now!" As Addison was walking towards her, Stacy could make out something in her mouth. The cracked voice rang out again. It was coming from Addison. "You stole a walkie-talkie?" Stacy grabbed the device from Addison's mouth. "You're a genius, Addison!" Stacy turned to dial on the top of the walkie-talkie and held it to her ear, trying to make out what the voices were saying. "We're going to circle around the ridge one more time to make sure, but the rain did most of the work for us. Fire's contained now. Over." Stacy breathed a sigh of overwhelming relief. The fire wasn't all the way out, but the danger of it spreading was gone. One by one, the various animals in the cave left, bowing their heads in thanks to Stacy and the wolves as they exited. Soon the cave was empty again. Tucker was at Basil's side, and Stacy knew he wouldn't sleep tonight. Everest was positioned himself at the cave's entrance, standing guard for the night, while Stacy took up her usual spot with the wolves to sleep. She rested on the head of Wink's back and let the wolf pups curl up against her stomach. Paige curled up against her feet. Tucked between Addison and Noah, Stacy closed her eyes, but sleep did not come. The peace she usually felt nestled among the wolves was no longer there. Did someone really start that fire intentionally? Is the Taiga really going to be turned into a golf course? Will the village roll back the wolf bounty now the Dusky's pack has perished from the fire? How many firefighters spotted me today? How many saw my wolves? Will they come looking for us? And why did that helicopter affect me the way it did? Something about the sound of the blades had been so familiar to Stacy, but the memory was too wispy and far away to grasp. Like today, it was connected to the smoke and the burning in her parents. A memory? I think it has to do with that part of the forest the wolves don't want me to explore, beyond where the moose was stuck. There were too many questions circling around in her head. Just like the helicopter, she could not make sense of it. But for all the uncertainty Stacy felt, there was one thing of which she was absolutely certain. She was determined, more than ever, to protect her wolves, defend the Taiga, and find the answers to all these questions, even if it meant interacting with humans. Stacy stared at the cave's ceiling, at peace with her new mission. One of the pups yawned and turned over. Things are about to change around here, that's for certain, but it will have to wait until tomorrow. And that is the end of Wild Rescuers, Guardians of the Taiga. Now you're probably wondering, Miss Byers, that ended so soon. I want more. Well, funny you should say that, because I have the second book right here. So, most likely, we're going to get to read this book next. I think that's where this is going. But for today, this is Miss Byers signing off. Have a good day, everybody. Miss you.